I don't trust a darn thing this Justice Department does, even if they do things I think is probably right in terms of administering and applying the law, certainly on political issues. The judge in Florida just issued a ruling knocking the sham documents case. This is the case where the Biden administration is pretending that the law prevented Trump from taking records with him from the White House, including records that they say are classified or national defense information, which of course he has a right to as president under the Presidential Records Act, relevant court authority, and prior Justice Department and National Archives positions, as demonstrated by Judicial Watch in recounting us being on the wrong end of that debate in the Clinton sock drawer case, where we had thought that there were Clinton records that should have been obtained by the archives after Clinton left office, and the archives told us to jump in a lake. The Justice Department told us that if Clinton had them, they were presumptively personal, and a court said you can't second-guess a president's decision-making in that regard. All of those, all that went out the window when it came to targeting Trump. They just pretended none of that happened. And there were other circumstances. It turned out, I didn't know this at the time in the Clinton sock drawer case, that you know that Reagan also had his diaries, which were also considered to be presidential records because they contain classified information. And they never went after those diaries because of the prerogatives that a president has in that regard. And one of the side notes of, I shouldn't say it's a side note, one of the central reasons that Special Counsel Hur said that he didn't think you could get Biden to get convicted, or that it would be not a good move to try to prosecute him, in addition to his increasing dementia, was that he had a plausible defense that he had a right to the records under the law. So for Biden, asserting that right is a reason not to prosecute him, but it's not applied similarly to Trump. What a scam that is, isn't it? So that's the case. They're trying to prosecute him down there. And of course, the court, the communist left, the anti-Trump left, whatever you want to call it. They've been using the word communist a lot more recently because I think that's the big threat here at home. Now, are all supporters of the attack on Trump communists? No, but they're certainly following their playbook of abusing power to target political opponents, like communist regimes across the world have done for ages. But the left really hates Judge Cannon down in Florida because, A, she's a Trump appointee. She's a female. I think she's Hispanic. So for a left, being a female and an Hispanic, and any minority who is associated with the conservative movement, that you have a target on your back. The left pretends that they, love women and love minorities. No, they only love them if they're politically useful. And you're only politically useful if you agree with them. Otherwise, you'll be targeted based on your race and sex. And in this case, her alleged lack of experience, which is never a problem for their friends when they're appointed to courts or they make decisions. And Cannon has been treating Trump fairly according to the rule of law, more or less. I think she's been too deferential to the government. And this week, she made it official. It's been largely understood this was going to be the case, but she made it official that there's no way on earth she's going to be able to get a trial in, I guess, next week. May 20th was the date. And she said, that's off the table, and I don't know when we're going to get to a trial at this point, because I've got a dozen major issues to decide within the next few months, some of which could upend the case completely. Like, for instance, the constitutionality of Smith's appointment. I've talked about this before. I talked about it with Mueller. And the question is Smith a constitutional appointment? Meaning, is his work constitutional in light of the fact he didn't have authority under the law to do it because of the nature of his appointment? And the thinking is generally, I think this is the thinking, it's been my thinking, is that you can't have a temporary worker come in and start running grand juries and throwing people in jail. As a prosecutor, they got to be they have to work directly for someone who is authorized to do that, which typically would be a Senate-confirmed official, like a U.S. attorney, top officials in the Justice Department, the Attorney General. They're the ones who have that responsibility, and the check related to that responsibility is their Senate appointment process and the fact that the president appointed them and they work directly for the president. And the idea that that Garland can hire someone off the street and then wash his hands and just let him do anything he wants to do is not right. Under that theory, they could hire Michelle Obama and just let her run the Justice Department prosecutions against all of Biden's political enemies because they're conflicted. So that's one of the issues that she has to deal with. The other issues relate to the handling of classified information or the mishandling of classified information. So the trial is off, at least for now. Meaning no date's been scheduled, to be clear. It's not off. And it's unlikely to occur before the election. It's not, well, let's put it this way. It's not going to occur before the election. I mean, this is how evil the Biden operation is. They were telling the judge that the lawyers for Trump, who are now dealing with their allies up in New York, they should be working concurrently during this trial in New York on this case to prepare for trial in 2 weeks or less. The due process rights of Trump, they don't care about. They don't believe he has due process rights. They certainly wouldn't behave this way if they did. But some of the filings now, the Justice Department has confirmed that they were tampering with evidence. Now, did they say we're tampering with evidence? But they described evidence tampering in a brief filed before Cannon the other day. I tweeted something out about it. I think we have the actual brief in our on screen here. Well, I will get to this later because this follows from that, from the description I want to talk about first. So they filed a brief admitting to lying to the court. They didn't call it lying, but I call it lying. As I tweeted out, they just admitted they messed with boxes supposedly containing classified records. Now, you remember all those boxes, right? All those boxes had classified records. Outrage. None of those records were classified under the law. But be that as it may, that's what the government's position was, and they pretended that they were classified or sensitive national security defense information. And this is what they told the court in a footnote after describing that they lost track of where the classified records were in the various boxes. So if they come raid your house and they accuse you of having records you're not supposed to have in your boxes, and they take the boxes away, and they take those records out and lose track of where they were in the boxes, do you think that makes the evidence valid? No. First of all, they were tampering with the evidence as it were anyway. And then they spoiled it. It's called spoliation. That's what Trump lawyers are calling it, spoliation. I mean, any charges related to that might be suspect now. And this is the footnote they had to explain it. The government acknowledges that this is inconsistent. I just described what they had screwed up, messing with the documents, that this is inconsistent with what the government counsel previously understood and represented to the court. Oh, this is what we previously understood, so don't blame us, Judge. We're just lawyers. Government responding to the court's question, this is the transcript, of whether the boxes were in their original intact form as seized by stating they are, with one exception, and that is the classified records have been removed and placeholders have been put in the documents. And here's the admission of the FBI completely screwing up that process. After the boxes were brought to Washington field office of the FBI created an index to correlate the documents with classification markings to codes, e.g. document BB, and labeling the classified cover sheets in the boxes with the codes for the seized documents. The FBI also generally replaced the handwritten sheets with classified cover sheets annotated with the index code, but regardless, any handwritten sheets that currently remain in the boxes do not represent additional classified documents. They were just not removed when the classified cover sheets with the index code were added. In many, this is the kicker, in many but not all instances, the FBI was able to determine which document with classification markings corresponded to a particular placeholder sheet. So the mirror image of that is that there were records that they were not able to link to where they were in the boxes. Evidence spoiled, illegitimate, scheme, fraud, scam. And is this the mishandling of classified information that they're trying to prosecute Trump for? Should the FBI be prosecuted? Should the Justice Department, who oversaw this, be prosecuted? Should there be a criminal investigation? And this further explains how it is that we already know this issue, that the that infamous photo was staged. So that photo was released by the government as part of a propaganda effort to destroy President Trump. The Biden administration wants to jail their opponents. So what do? They come up with photos. And the photo is obviously staged. The documents were not found in that state, but it's even worse than that, as this admission discloses and confirms. As I noted back in 2022, 2 years ago, it was a dishonest photo, and it was submitted in the court to the court. This wasn't something they just released. They were trying to mislead a court here. Those agencies are irredeemably corrupted, I can tell you. Well, let's go back to that photo. So I want you to look at that photo. They would have you believe, to make Trump look more guilty, that when you see secret there at the bottom or top secret there in the right, in the upper right, that's what was in the boxes. And that Trump and anyone around him obviously should have known, you're going through documents. Oh, look at the yellow and red index sheets. They put those there as placeholders. That isn't what the original document looked like. Man, if I were Judge Cannon, I'd have a big old hearing on that scam. A show cause order in some way to make it clear and demand accountability for who was trying to mislead the court here. There's your FBI, folks, fully funded. I don't trust a darn thing they do. I don't trust a darn thing this Justice Department does, even if they do things I think is probably right in terms of administering and applying the law, certainly on political issues. I know there's a presumption of evidence for people who have been indicted. I think it should be even more than that. You should just presume improper conduct by the Justice Department and FBI, especially on politically sensitive cases. Like this congressman, Democratic congressman down in Texas, was indicted a few weeks ago, I guess it was the week before last. Cuellar, right? He and his wife. Democrat, anti-Biden on border issues, but generally reliable Democrat, but not very good on border issues, which is key to the presidency of Joe Biden. And he was indicted. And for all I know, he did everything they're alleging he did. But for all I know, because it came from the Justice Department, they could be making up crap against this guy. And we should just presume everything they do is compromised. Everything. Until there's significant reform. I mean, in the case of the FBI and Justice Department, I don't know how they survive in their current form if you're trying to get them back to the good graces of constitutional government. Meanwhile, the rioting continues here in the District of Columbia. I went to school at George Washington University. They had the communists taken over there, and GW asked the police to come in, and the mayor of D.C., the Democrat, said no. And they only cleaned up I think they only moved in the day before, or the day of their testimony before the House, because the House got, some members of House, both Democrats and Republicans are like, what do you mean? You're not enforcing the law? And so they went in and they arrested these folks, and I noted this morning in the Washington Post that all of them have been released. They weren't even processed normally. Compare and contrast how they treated those communist terrorist supporters with how they're treating the January 6th defendants. Despicable. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.